Hello YouTube, it's me again. Today I'm here with another political coverage video, and this is on today's Alabama Senate special election, which will be happening in less than 6 hours. Well, 5 hours and 45 minutes if I'm getting my times right. So polls will close at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time if you're living in Alabama, and if you're watching this video and you're in Alabama and you haven't had a chance to vote, well, I do encourage you to go vote. So, yeah, this video is kind of just to talk about the race between Roy Moore and Doug Jones, and just sharing you my thoughts on how this mess of a race is probably going to play out later tonight, and just my personal thoughts, which I'll probably end up getting up on the soapbox. So, basically, I think at this point we all know who Roy Moore is, former Alabama Chief Supreme Court Justice, twice removed, actually. He ran for governor a couple times. He ran against Bob Riley in 2006, lost by a margin of 2-1. He ran for governor again 4 years later in 2010. He did make the runoff. I think he got like 4th place or something. Something along those lines. And then there's Doug Jones, who's the former U.S. attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, who prosecuted I think it was like a Klansman from the KKK bombed church, prominent black church in northern Alabama. I don't know the exact details, but I mean, it's in his biography. He talks about it a lot. I'm sure you guys can find it. So, yeah, originally this was Jeff Sessions' old seat, but now Jefferson Beauregard Sessions is now our great attorney general. Yay. And so a guy named Luther Strange name, was the appointee. But so he ran for a full term, and I'll just scroll down. Yeah, so these were all the candidates that ran. So it ended up being Roy Moore versus Luther Strange, and in the end, Moore won by about 10 points. Well, 9.2%, but if you round 54.6 up, it's 55-45. So, and Doug Jones initially had some trouble against guy with a famous last name, although he is not related to the famous Kennedy family. But he ended up pulling out okay in the end. Pretty solid victory right there. And you can see that. So polls have been all over the place as lately, mainly because of this. Now, whether you believe it's true or not, again, I'll inject my thoughts into this later. I want to keep at least the first 5 minutes of this purely non-biased and just analytical. Regardless if you believe these things are true or not, it has definitely had a very negative impact on Roy Moore's campaign, and you could see that. So, when did this break? It was November 9th. Okay, so. So up to about here, what I'm highlighting. Granted, Roy Moore has always been a controversial figure because of his resistance to removing a Ten Commandments monument and defying same-sex marriage, the ban, or well, the overturn of the ban rather. He's been pretty popular with social conservatives who are in very large numbers in the state of Alabama. But in terms of the broader electorate, and there's like other brands of Republicans that live in Alabama, that isn't necessarily they don't necessarily view Roy Moore the same as most social conservatives would view him. And so he was polling pretty low for a typical Republican in Alabama, but it was still a decent lead, give or take. Low as 4 points to as high as 17, is at least as far as I can see. Actually, well, 22, but that was early on. And then when the allegations broke, it started out as a tie, a couple late polls. Then there was like a couple weird polls that showed him like up like by that, and then there's a couple single digits, and then the leads, but from here just kind of swung back and forth between them. And it looks like going into this, depending on what poll you look at, really it's anywhere from Moore up 9 to Jones up 10. So on the political Twitter, if you're into that sort of thing like I am, you know that it will come down to turnout. If it's more like the turnout we've been seeing than in like for example, in the New Jersey and Virginia governor races and all the other congressional district special elections that have been happening this year, then Jones stands probably to win. But if it's more traditional based, like as in like say the 2014 midterms where Sessions was last up, or the election last year, then Roy Moore probably stands to win. Will that end up happening? Well, again, no one knows for sure, but turnout has, from what I've been seeing, turnout has been up in areas that Jones needs to win in, and turnout's been down in rural counties where Moore would need to win. And fun fact also, Moore ran in 2012 for his old job in the Chief Justice Supreme Court. That's an elected position in Alabama, and he ended up winning by 4 points, while Romney won the state by over 20. So that goes to show you that there are certain brands of Republicans who do not like Roy Moore. And with write-in candidates, which I can show you where. Okay. Lee Busby is probably the most prominent among them, and there's some others. So I mean that's probably gonna hurt Roy Moore. In the end, who do I think is gonna win? I mean, this is Alabama, one of the most conservative states in the nation. But Jones is in contention. But if I were to say, I would say Roy Moore would probably win. I would give him about a 2 and 3 chance of winning. So 67% chance for Roy Moore, 33% for Doug Jones. But so yeah, if Roy Moore wins, we shouldn't be completely shocked. But if Jones wins, I don't think I mean, granted, it will be a jarring political event, but it shouldn't be too much of a surprise considering the polling we've been seeing in the margin of error that's been swinging all around. So either one of these guys has a good chance of winning, but considering this is Alabama, I would say Roy Moore would win. So that would be. So that's the analytical part. Now I'm going to get into my more personal thoughts. So if you don't want to hear me get on a soapbox, this is probably your best chance now to get off. But if you want to stay and hear my personal thoughts, well, first of all, thank you. Second of all right, well, let's get to the rant. Okay. Personally, I'm rooting for Doug Jones to win this. Now, that may become a shock to you because I do identify myself as a Republican. And typically, I have supported Republican candidates since I've been focused on politics since 2012. Rather consistently, I've been supporting Republicans. I never really supported a Democrat up until this point because personally, for me, I do believe the allegations. I mean, there's no reason that I mean, there hasn't been any anything that's disproved that. And given that Roy Moore is just a generally awful person, he's bigoted, he's real for whatever reason really against same-sex marriage, and he's really a radical Christian. I mean, if you want to scale, he's hard line in every retrospect. And essentially, if you don't agree with his radical interpretation of Christianity, then essentially, God damn you. So, again, I do, and the way the allegations are, I mean, it does seem something like Roy Moore would do. I mean, and again, with all these allegations that have been coming out against famous media figures, other politicians, or other people that we know, it just seems to me like that. I mean, they wouldn't be doing this for attention. We're in the stage that people are coming out and holding these people accountable for what they've done in the past, regardless of how long ago it was. In this case, I think this was when Roy Moore was in his 30s, so this was close to 40 years ago. So 1960s, 70s, give or take. So yeah, so I mean, Roy Moore's views, I mean, I strongly disagree with, because in the political sense, way too hard line. I mean, he would be to the right of Ted Cruz, of all people. And not to mention, he is supported by Donald Trump, Steve Bannon. Now, if you like those guys, good for you, and then I'm sure he's your candidate, but I do not, because Roy Moore and Donald Trump do not speak for me as a Republican. They are part of what I would call the populist establishment of the Republican Party. They are essentially the new establishment that they dictate, everything that happens. They're still the party establishment, but of course they don't show enough spine to stand up to try to veer the party back towards what the party originally should stand for. And Steve Bannon and Donald Trump stand for what is not conservatism. They stand for these insanely radical social views, radical populist views that just in practice or on paper sound good, but in practice will be a disaster for the country. And granted, they haven't been implemented to the fullest extent yet. But again, with all and not to mention, since Donald Trump is such an unstable figure, and Steve Bannon is one of those enablers, and Steve Bannon is putting up a bunch of, nutcase candidates, and Roy Moore is clearly one of them. I mean, and then not to mention, there's Danny Tarkanian in Nevada, Kelly Ward in Arizona, Michael Grimm in New York. I mean, there's a whole host of basket cases that Steve Bannon is supporting. And I personally believe the only way we can wrestle back the party from the populist establishment as Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, and Roy Moore is for Roy Moore to lose. I mean, granted, the Senate, would go from 52-48 to 51-49. Personally, the Senate can barely get anything done to begin with, so it's a really tough, it's a lose-lose situation for Republicans, because if Roy Moore wins, then he's just going to be a pain, and he could very well be possibly a lifer senator. He could be in there for as long as he chooses to. But if Doug Jones wins, then it instantly goes to that, and then Democrats will only need 2 seats, which will be Nevada and Arizona, to regain control of the Senate next year. But personally, what if it's essentially with Roy Moore? It's a short-term win with long-term consequences. With Doug Jones for Republicans, short-term loss, but in the long run, the seat's up again in 2020, and I'm pretty sure Republicans, if they just put someone with a pulse, I think that they would who isn't and who has somewhat of an IQ above 50. I'm pretty sure they'll flip that seat back. So. Not to mention, Roy Moore has a very bad record as well. For a guy who was on the Supreme Court, or actually a Supreme Court, he should know the law, and he's defied the law just for the sake of making a point. And apparently, you can only follow the law with Roy Moore. You only follow the law as long as it suits you. As soon as it doesn't suit you, you break it and you scream, "Oh my God, I'm being discriminated against." So I won't touch any more further of that, because then that's gonna be a slippery slope. But still, I will be personally rooting for Doug Jones. Again, I'm not overly optimistic that he will win, but if he wins, great. I wouldn't take that much satisfaction other than the fact that it would be a blow to the Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Roy Moore populist establishment. But if Roy Moore wins, I would not be all too surprised. So that's my rant for personal thoughts on the race. Leave your thoughts below on who you think will win. And I will see you guys on the next video. So yeah, bye.